Hello, and thank you for listening. This one is referred and called Dark Night, Fairy and Nyx. Many years ago, I held a very strong belief that there was no such thing as fairies or fae. And around that period in time, somebody said something very wise to me: that which you resist persists. And what I learned in relationship to that is that which you resist persists, and that which you mock will most surely become your teacher, and not necessarily the most gentle one. That is what I learned about the fairy and the fae. There are very serious studies and spiritual workings with relation to the fairy, and I know there is a fairy tradition, I think, that is associated within the witch culture. In almost every single place around the world, we have stories of little people, and we have very interesting stories about little people. I have had my own experiences with working with the little people, but I wanted to talk about one of the, what I think might be a little known fact about the dark night for the fairy celebration. The fairy are, on a shamanic perspective, in the medicine wheel perspective, they're associated often with the West and the magical, the mystical, the depth, the psyche, the unconscious, those aspects, those fundamental associations with the element of West. But really, I mean, anything that is magical and mystical can happen anywhere around the medicine wheel. Just because we put it in a compartment doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to stay that way. So the fae and the dark night. Many years ago, I ran into a wonderful forgotten history for myself, was that the dark moon prior to summer solstice was also considered to be the dark night of the fairy. So what is the dark night of the fairy, and why is that a celebration? The new moon marks a very ancient event, in that, as I had said, the dark moon before summer solstice has been recognized as the night when the little people, the fairy, the fae, the various beings that dwell in quote-unquote the other place, gather and begin their preparations for summer solstice. And summer solstice has long been recognized as the night when the veil between the fairy realm and the human world is at its thinnest. And if you're especially lucky, you will have 2 new moons in May. And the second new moon in a month it's kind of a rare occurrence, but by many it's considered to be the other moon. So in shamanism, we see this as the night to travel to the other realm, or the land of the fae, the land of the nature spirits, the land of the fairy. I like to do rituals that invite the fairy folk to come and to be with us. I don't necessarily see the fae or the fairy as a benevolent, loving, fun being. I have the experience of very powerful, very strong spirits who are not open to very much frivolity, and who represent themselves or present themselves to me as very capable beings in relationship to the earth that I can barely even understand with my human mind and my urban mind as well. The fae and the fairy really like the combined energies of the dark moon and the solstice. So it's my opinion that we can care about nature more when we've been touched by the wildness and the spirit of nature. the fairy introduced me to a very unique sense of wildness. And there's been a few experiences. That one of the first times I did a summer solstice ceremony, I had spent a long period of time, and I developed the altars for all of the different directions, and then I'd ground a very special smudge for the fairy. And as you would imagine, working with fairy, when I put something down, it would often disappear. And it was a really fun ritual to prepare for. But I also have done ceremonies on the second new moon of the month of May, the dark night of the fairy, because I already have an association, first of all, with the new moon. It is a powerful time for me if I decide to work with it from a ritual world. And to work with the fairy on the dark night prior to summer solstice is a very interesting mix for me, because they are a strong and powerful group of beings in that home. So in that ritual space, we're going to create us an abode or a seat for spirit, for the fairy. And then what we're going to do is in this dark night of the fairy also refers to that being, that state of being. So the ritual is that abode that we set. So the dark night of the fairy ritual. So we don't have one word. I don't have one word like the Welsh word said, but I am encompassing all three aspects. And then when the dark night or the new moon before the summer solstice comes, I have a journey and a relationship with the fairy. One of the ways that I connect very well with the fairy is through using a trance posture called calling the spirits. On the website Shaman's Way, there is a book review on Belinda Gore's gestures, and in that book is the posture that I'm referring to, calling in the spirits. I like to do that particular trance posture against a tree, and I have found that the standing nation really helped me to learn the language of nature and really do help me connect to the fairy in a very unique and interesting way. The trance posture, when done in combination with the new moon and the fairy, it gives me practical offerings. It gives me practical things to do for the spirits of nature. And the spirits of nature, the fairy and the fae, in return, teach me how to hear the whispers of the forest and understand the language of nature. It's not difficult. Spirit has taught me over the years, whether I wanted to learn or not, how to be an attentive listener. Pay attention to what is going on around you. Honor, love, and respect are three very small ingredients to reconnecting and restoring your bond with nature and all of her beings. Song is a very important part of many of my rituals. With the Sami tradition, we have a tradition that is called yoiking. Yoiking is a singing spirit through my body, or singing spirit through me. A yoik on a dark night of the fairy invites a different intensity to song. Love to sing. And in many of the stories that you'll read about the fairy and the fairy folk, oftentimes they are the best musicians, they are the best dancers, and they dance for hours and days at a time. So we know that we have a collective understanding that the fairy have a love of expression or a love of voice. When I am involved in Dark Night of the Fairy ceremonies, I like to encourage myself and encourage the people with me to sing and to dance. And that the power, given to us by the fairy could be, things such as heightened intuition, clarity, and awakening. So imagine you sing and you dance and you give yourself to these beings, and in return, the gifts that they give you back, could be intuition, clarity, and awakening. The fairy and the fae, in conjunction with the dark night or any other time as well, they are the peoples that have been on the earth for as long as the earth has had rivers, valleys, and life itself. I know we've talked about shamanism in various forms. It is long traced back to man's spiritual awakenings. We have many times, through discussion and circles on the website, your own experiences, you have been conscious of your journeys into the other worlds, a practice of conscious interaction with the spirit world. When we journey in specific rituals, we're waking up our spiritual potential in another form, in that ritual space, in that container form, in that ritual space, in that container of ritual, in that inviting of the beings, and in that sense of peace and communion with spirit. We are awakening in ritual to a deeper level of our spiritual potential. In ritual, and we begin to explore our spiritual relationship with the universe, with the other forms of life, such as fairy. We learn to walk with one foot in this world and one foot in the spirit world, and we walk with part of the intention of bringing spirit into matter and matter to spirit. I want to talk just a little bit about songs, because they are useful for such powerful work, whether you're working a dark night of the fairy or whether you're working winter solstice, working in the goddesses that I have found a lovely association with, and I love the myths that are associated with Nyx that we'll talk about in a little bit. While in shamanic trance states, one of the things that we attempt to achieve are sacred songs, songs that have a life of their own. Songs and chants are really very mystical. They're very magical. The fairy and nature love song, and it has been my experience that they feed me songs they want to hear. That's part of yoiking. My part of the song is to provide a voice, and it really doesn't matter whether you can sing or not. The challenge for some people is to be open to sing whatever comes and not to ever worry about where the end point is. Spirit takes care of that. Songs and chants, Spirit takes care of that. Songs and chants awaken me to my connection to Spirit, or awaken that connection to Spirit. It awakens that connection to nature, to the standing nation, to the trees. Singing is the language that reconnects me and restores the bonds that I have between myself and all beings. Singing is a beloved gift that we can give to the standing nation over the trees. If the standing nation is my reference for the trees. And over the years, the standing nation have given me stories and legends to share with others. And the gift that I've given is my voice. No matter how scratchy I think I sound, I find I can hear the sigh in the leaves of the trees, or the breeze through the evergreens. I've never ceased to be amazed at how voice and nature respond together. One year, my kids and I were exploring a fairly remote island off the coast of Vancouver Island, just around Victoria. As we were walking towards the beach, I was pulled deeply into the forest, I put my things down, and this huge voice came from nowhere, and I stood and I sang to the trees. It was such a powerful experience for me that I wept from the outpouring of the gratitude that I could feel of the trees around me. And I didn't know how long it had been since someone had sang to the ocean, or someone had stopped to be sung by the spirit of that forest. 2 days later on that same trip, I am sure I was gifted because of what I had done in this manner. My children and I went on a whale watching tour in a small 12-person dinghy. And early in the tour, we spotted 2 orcas from a family pod. And I remember sitting on the boat, and I remember praying hard to the spirit of the orcas to please come close and allow us to see them. And what happened about an hour or so later was our small dinghy was literally surrounded by orcas. They had a microphone in the water, and I closed my eyes and I listened to their underwater haunting melodies and the chorus of the blow whale bounding us. I cried. I was so touched. The beautiful part of the story is the marine biologist that was on the boat with us said that this particular pod was not supposed to arrive in the bay until later that night. So for some unknown reason, they had traveled hard and fast and were an unexpected sight. Singing is communication, and we move through the standing nation. I move through voice, and that helps me to stand on the edge of the realm of the fairy, and I await their invitation to join them in their world. The standing nation practice through the calling the spirits trance, standing posture, is a way to use the eyes and ears to hear with the calling the spirits senses. So this is a way of using a whole body mudra, or a whole body way of receiving energy. And through that, we attune ourselves to nature and the world of the fairy. And the experience of becoming a walker between the worlds to explore the fairy realm with blessings and return with a fuller, more alert spiritual being, so that we practice that aspect of the alert awareness. Winter solstice is a dark night, obviously, and I have appreciated and enjoyed working with winter solstice many times over my years of practicing shamanism. It has become one of my most cherished rituals, my most cherished givings of myself for connection and relationship to spirit. Nyx is a very interesting being. She's one of the primordial or protogenitous beings. Nyx was the goddess of the night and emerged as the dawn of creation. Nyx did not have a father. The mother, or the creatrix of Nyx, was chaos. So out of chaos came night. Out of the coupling, her husband, or Nyx, took to her bosom to her bed, or they took to each other's bed, Erebus. And Erebus is darkness. From that Erebus, so darkness and night in their loving embrace of darkness twirled for however long it took to twirl, and between them between darkness and night, they created a golden egg. And out of that golden egg comes Eros. And Eros is the god of love. But Eros in the very beginning was a three-faced god and a double-sexed goddess being. Eros was that sun child, that promised child, Lu, who is the sun god, and we have the night goddess Grian, and between the two of them, they have a relationship at winter solstice, and it is promised that they're going to have a sun child. So at winter solstice, 9 months later, is autumn, and that is their sun child. The relationship between darkness and night and the relationship of Eros is only one of the stories of Nyx. Nyx and Erebus created Aether, which was light, and Hemera, which is day. She also spawned a brood of dark spirits, including the three fates, as well as sleep, death, strife, and pain. This ancient deity is envisioned as the very substance of the night, a veil of dark mist drawn across the sky to obscure the light of Aether and the shining blue of the heavens. Her opposite, obviously, Hemera, day, scattered the mists of night at dawn. In ancient art, Nyx is depicted either as a winged goddess or a charioteer, and sometimes she is crowned with an aura of dark mist. So here we have another story, a primordial story that refers to the beings of creation as being further beyond us. However, Nyx has a different relationship in my heart. I love the thought of Nyx being that progenitor of light. I love Nyx being on the darkest night of the year. I envision Nyx holding that child of light, or as the myths have moved on, we now have darkness and light together. We now have the goddess of night, and now we have the sun god. And as the myths progressed, we saw a relationship between nighttime and daytime, between the darkness and the sun. And so on winter solstice, I love telling the story of how night Nyx holds her so very close and so very lovingly, trying so very hard to allow sun, or make sun, her lover, stay with her. So this night of the last touches of that intimacy and embrace. And for 3 days, the world stands still, and for 3 days, the sun imperceptibly moves along the horizon. For 3 days, that gestational period after solstice, I think when the relationship or the untwining of night and sun, or darkness and sun, or night and day, where the dark night of the medicine wheel, the darkness of the medicine wheel begins to release light back out so that it can become equal at spring equinox. So the darkness of the dark moon, the darkness of night, the darkness of the Fae, and the giving of the gifts, the offering of the self to give back to that spirit. Winter solstice a time of releasing that which no longer serves you. If you have a new moon at the time of winter solstice, the doubling of dark from my spiritual perspective is what happens, that doubling of darkness. Not only do we have the longest night of the year, but we have the darkest time and the darkest of the 3 dark nights of the dark moon. It's a very interesting aspect also of the feminine and eventually of the masculine. Nyx is that part of creation that doesn't require a father. It is an independent aspect of femininity that everybody has, regardless of gender or no gender. The relationship that ensues between the new moon and winter solstice creates an even greater opportunity for the releasing of the things that are dead, the things that the time has died, their ideas have died. Death, kind of makes move to make neat the world again. So winter solstice, the last new moon before winter solstice. So this year that will be November 29th. And that will be a night where a special ceremony in my house will be done in order to allow that what has died through this year truly transition so that it can be celebrated, or that I can take notice of that at winter solstice, and hope from the time of November 29th to the time of winter solstice this year that I allow space for my own sense of spirit, my own sense of being to be released. Winter solstice, this is something that occurs every year. This particular ceremony can occur every year. Whatever the new moon falls closest to winter solstice, we have a greater connection and relationship. I think the veils are thinnest even still. Darkness is something that we come to terms with in our own way, in our own mind. And not everyone is comfortable with the dark of night. The dark of night is not always safe for everyone. And I can respect and honor that. What I wanted to do in our time together was really share my thoughts and my feelings regarding dark nights and the fairy and Nyx. The fairy have been very interesting teachers for me, and song has been a healing balm. It has been a messenger for spirits to ride my body and to use my voice. I teach oftentimes that giving gifts is what creates a strong relationship between the world of spirit and your world, and finding what gifts, what offerings to give in a concrete sense helps the density and the relationship, the giving and the offering, the give and the take, the receiving and the gifting is a very important aspect of many stories, many traditions, many rituals. So on nights when you want to do ceremony, on dark nights, whether it is with the fairy, whether it is with Nyx, whatever it is, I encourage you to do so. I encourage you to do so with offerings. That offering could be cornmeal, tobacco, your hair. It could be an elaborate creation that you burn. It could be a creation of ice lights. I don't know what it is, but there are many ways of recognizing your relationship to spirit and solidifying that relationship of spirit through the expression of gratitude. The time of the dead and the time for the dead to move on to the next world is also important at winter solstice. It has long been a time of the year when, if someone had died in your house that year, there was a special cleanse done inside the house of my grandmothers and my grandfathers in Finland, and if there was something that needed to be cleaned out of the house, it was the opening of the doors and the sweeping of the house, the sweeping of the land around, although I don't imagine there was a lot of sweeping in December in any part of the northern world, as December is not often a time of year of sweeping, but more so shoveling. But anyway, the relationship between a shamanism, shamanic practitioner, the shaman, and the dark is so individual that I don't think that it is everybody's path. I know that there are individuals who really are drawn to work and with the encompassment of all love, and I give honor and respect to that path and that following. For myself, the relationship also is one that celebrates the darkness and isn't afraid of it. I love winter solstice. I love singing. I love yoiking and aspecting. All of those things are part of a solstice ritual for me. I like the opportunity of taking the longest, darkest night of the year and asking for prophecies. It is almost as though when you ask for prophecies on this night, it's like that small kernel of light is already growing and releasing the tight hold that nighttime or dark has. Tight hold that nighttime or dark has on light, or the winter has on the summer. It is a great time to remember that we hibernate. It is natural. It is part of the circadian rhythm that we wish to sleep more in the darkness, because we are creatures of the light, most of us, not all of us, and we do have a certain level of relationship to the sun and to vitamin D and to feeling better. The fairy are your own relationship, and whether you have a relationship with fairy or not is entirely in your repertoire of spiritual allies and spiritual relationships. Again, I certainly don't have the cue on your relationship to the spirit world. I do encourage you to remember that which you resist persists. So if you clicked on this because you wanted to listen to something that you could debunk, then I encourage you to enjoy yourself debunking. For those who clicked on because you like dark nights, or you like the fairy, or you like Nyx, I hope that you come away with another relationship or understanding of the relationship between the darkness and the fairy, and what darkness began as in many of our traditions as a primordial being. And that the dark nights, whether they be winter solstice or dark moons, are an honoring or an homage of the nighttime, and our remembrance of the sky nations, our remembrance of Father Sun and Grandmother Moon, and the relationship that our ancestors created through ritual, through song, through dance, through myths, as a means and a way of understanding our place within the world, understanding our place within the cycle of time, understanding our place within regeneration, rejuvenation, and life and death. Recognizing the darkness is just as important as recognizing the light. We've had lots of discussions on nightmares and shadow power animals. I don't need to belabor those points. I just really would like to express of the dark nights and my love of the darkness. And knowing that I was born on a new moon makes sense to me why I would be very drawn to this particular type of work. I encourage you to, as always, find your own path, and as always, to embrace what you have a capital K knowing about, and what the capital S spirit is for you, and how do you express that? How do you create a container or a home or an abode for spirit? How do you recognize when spirit moves into that abode with you? And how do you express the ecstasy of that relationship or that piece of that relationship? Are you going to, can we all become more comfortable working within the aspect of the wheel, whether that wheel be a 24-hour wheel, that wheel be a 12-month wheel, or that wheel of time be the Mayan calendar that lasts 5,200 and some odd years, and therefore the turning of the time of December 21st, 2012 was really just the turning of a calendar that had finally expired, and hopefully the dawn of new things occur. So myths of solstices and myths of the darkness are primordial for us. The time of chaos, the place of chaos, is primordial for us. It is what we know. It has to be indelibly marked upon our limbic brain, our instinct brain, long before were in the darkness, likely huddled in caves to protect ourselves from the huge beasts that roamed the wildness in which our ancestors' lived in. And from that darkness, we have created many types of relationships, many types of mythologies, many types of ceremonies, many types of communications. I wish to leave you with one last thought. The expression of your relationship to spirit, I hope you take into the physical world and not just into the mental world. It's very easy to think that we are doing just as much by thinking about it, when in actual fact we do a lot more by think that we are doing just as much by thinking about it, when in actual fact we do a lot more by doing something. So I encourage you to do something, whether it is put water out on the new moon or the full moon, or whether it is to spend an hour with your drum or your rattle on winter solstice and send some energy of yourself out into the spirit world so that you can in turn maybe have an experience with the spirit world. And this ends this particular chat we have regarding dark nights, fairy, and Nyx. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to our 23rd episode of Shaman's Way. If you do have any special requests or comments, head on over to shamansway.net and join this and would like to help us reach other people who may also like it. Please do leave a comment and rating on iTunes or whatever podcasting network you happen to be listening to this on. Hopefully everyone's doing well, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks. Cheers.